Thank you. Now, I could always deliver the speech in a complete monotone, and since you are eating, see, and count, how many can fall asleep during the program? But I don't think I'm going to do that. Instead, I want to reminisce a little bit and talk about some of the lessons learned through some stories that I want to tell about working here at Kettering these last 17 years. If you look 17 years, back in 1996, I hired into GMI, EMI, and 98 we became Kettering, and today it's 2013, and we're 2 presidents, 3 provosts, and who knows how many faculty later. But they've been great years. And some interesting things have happened over those years. And I want to start off talking about developing interdisciplinary partnerships and how that came about. Now, sometimes these things start with serendipity. Sorry, Beverly, that's the only picture I could come up with. My first real out-of-department experience came when I met Professor Regina Greenwood. She now chairs the management department down at Nova Southeastern University. But she was here for many years, and she and I met each other and joined up with 2 students in a quiz bowl team. And this was a quiz bowl. It was held out in the great court, and this was the greatest way to start off an experience with somebody from another department, because we demolished the other teams. We charged through, we won every single round of the competition by over double the points of the next highest ranking team. In fact, we had so much success the following year they changed the rules. But it was a lot of fun. She was great on the literature and artistic answers. If it was any way technical, I could grab an answer. I'm pretty good at history too. So we had a lot of fun. But that fun led to cooperation. We actually presented a paper together with David Hoyt, who is today one of our trustees. He's also now married to Regina, and I make the claim I introduced the 2 of them. But our paper just happened to be in St. Louis on 9/11. We were presenting as events were happening. So, very difficult day. We were in actually separate hotels and arranged, through the various front desks to stay an extra night, but we needed to somehow get back to the Detroit area. How would we do that? It's kind of tough when there's no air travel and everything's pretty well shut down. Well, at the time, Dave was CEO of J.L. French Automotive Castings, and this firm had been acquired by a private equity firm, and he was running it for that firm, and he was a quadruple emerald member of their frequent renters club. That means when he showed up, he didn't even have to go to the desk. He just swiped the card and got in a car. Okay, that's the level he was at. He called his special service number, and what do you think they told him?
We don't have nothing available.
Sorry, sir, we don't have any cars available. Sometimes mentorship happens in interesting situations. Here I am thinking, no cars, obviously they've shut things down, nothing's going to happen. Well, watching Dave operate And I'll tell you a secret if you all promise not to tell him. How many have seen the movie Iron Man? Okay. Just watch Robert Downey Jr. in there. He talks just like Dave Hoyt. Dave says, let me talk to your supervisor. Let me talk to your manager. He says, all right, what I want is fairly simple. I need a car to go one way to Flint, Michigan, and I'm here in St. Louis. Now I can see from my hotel window your lot, and there are cars on there. So I have a very simple proposition for you. I need a car by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm a quadruple emerald member, and all of my senior staff and employees at J.L. French Automotive Castings rent from your company. If I do not have a car by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for a one-way trip, we will be doing business with Avis next week. Guess what? We had a car. Nice one, too. Now, threatening is not the point. It was offering a simple statement that I, as a customer, have a need. I've been loyal to your company, and so is my company. You need to fulfill my need. And then he proceeded, as we were driving, to run his company from the back seat of the car on his cell phone. And oh, by the way, they just had a major industrial accident. Automotive castings, they did what's called die casting. You have two large dies that come together and liquid aluminum is injected. Well, one of the employees had left a wrench in there and decided that he could stop the dies from closing. So, it was quite a day. But listening to him not only talk to his people, and by the way, he was far more diplomatic than he had been with the National Rent-A-Car, but also points that he made about leadership and the need for leadership in certain situations were tremendously instructive. So, again, mentorship, cooperating with people not only in your, that are not in your area, but that are in completely different businesses. We went on in October of 2001, so barely a month later, Professor Jones, myself, and Professor Greenwood went to Germany, met with our German partners over there, negotiated some changes to our agreement with the university, and came back. And this is a program that IME and business share. So again, we were able to accomplish our goals, but how did this all start? Game of Quiz Bowl. Who would have thunk it? Went on to have some more cooperative activities with Regina and the Department of Business. We teamed up. Ford was interested in a master's level program that focused on lean. Okay, I'm kind of guessing most people in the room have heard of lean today, but this was in the early days, not that many years after The Car That Changed the World was published. And we took training in lean down at Ford. We developed all of the courses and necessary paperwork for approval to have a lean master's degree through the Department of Business. We even had a co-op model within that program. And it ran for several years. Eventually, there were changes at Ford. So much of the lean organization kind of disbanded. It was a little too identified with Jack Nasser, who was president of Ford one time and was succeeded by Bill Ford after the board decided that Jack Nasser's time at Ford was done. So again, we had fun. We took some great training together. We cooperated, and it all started with Quiz Bowl. Okay, so interdisciplinary work can get started in many ways, but the other lesson here, the other takeaway, I keep emphasizing Quiz Bowl, and that is the social nature of cooperation. Okay, social events, social cooperation on things other than the technical are what you can use to create the relationships for highly successful technical cooperation. So keep that in mind as you move forward in your career. Another great thing that I had a chance to do while here at Kettering was conceiving and having developed KQuest. Students, if you're working on a thesis, you've already looked at KQuest, you entered your PTA in the KQuest system. This was a cooperation on many levels. I started out with my staff in thesis services over in the Heritage Room. We had a 2-day on-site meeting where we sat and we went through every detail of processing a thesis. Everything start to the grade sheet being given and the student heading off to receive their degree. And then, being a good IE, I said, now we need to improve that process. So we'd mapped out the process and improved the process. Okay, now the question is, how do you make something happen? Well, you write a specification. I wrote a 23-page specification for the software and gave it to the IT development group to develop in-house what became KQuest. Guess what the reaction was? Wow, nobody's ever given us one of these before. People write, put things into the system saying, oh, I want this, I want that, but nobody ever bothers to write a specification. Well, we had a spec to start with. We worked through it. It took us a year. And we even tweaked the process along the way, not to fit the software, but because we came up with new ideas. IT development folks, faculty, staff, on ways to make all of this better. And eventually then, we launched it. We had, for the first time, we had in-house computer capability to handle PTAs, tracking of the thesis through the process. And if you'll notice, once your PTA gets approved, it even generates your deadlines for you. Should pay attention to those deadlines, by the way. They get you done. Get you done on time. But I had a great group of people to work with. And what was key here? What's the takeaway? Communication. It was the communication piece of that specification that provided the ability for us to look at something common and work through all of the aspects of developing a major piece of software. So don't forget the social aspect, don't forget the communication aspect. And communication was especially key when we got into the grading system change. Now at this point, have any of the students been here long enough that you got, yeah, that's right, Ben got some 100 points. Okay, good. So a couple of you remember the 100-point scale that we used to use. And yeah, that's right. But you haven't gotten letter grades since. That's. Although I could give you a quiz on. No. But again, this was something we'd used for 50 years. Was there anything inherently wrong with grading students that way? No, but what we had been seeing in academic affairs was problems with transfer credits, problems with admissions to graduate schools, other schools not understanding our system. Of the 3,000, of the 3,000 or so colleges in the U.S., 95% use letter grades and a 4-point scale for grading. And that may be low, it may be 98%. But the point is, we were far enough out of the mainstream, it was hurting our students. So we needed to do something. And the provost gave me the task of leading this project. So again, communication was key. We formed a committee. It included, the Senate moderator, the registrar, other key staff members, and got together and worked through. We did some simulations. We developed a communications plan, and we went out department by department, met with each department around campus, and explained the change, explained the reasons for the change, and the methods and timing of the implementation. Now, obviously, we grade on a 4-point scale with letter grades now. It was summer of 2009 that we began the current grading system. What's the takeaway here? It's not just communication. It's explaining a reasonable plan with reasonable timing and reasonable support. Guess what happens? You bring people along with you. When we implemented without glitches. Now, I do have to note Sheila and her team did a huge amount of work in the registrar's office on the implementation, because they ultimately had to make sure that these things happened in Banner, and she had support from IT, but we had a smooth transition. Did everybody 100% like it? No, but we had a smooth transition. So, what have been my points? Social, communication.
Enrolling people along the way.
Pardon?
Enrolling people along the way.
And pulling people along the way, that's right. So again, this is what interdisciplinary work can be about, whether it's in the academic area of developing new programs, cooperating on research, or in the administrative area where you're working heavily with processes and other ways of doing things. Another cooperative thing is the SAP University Alliance. I worked with the former head of the Department of Business. We joined this alliance in 2010. And what this does is give access to SAP to faculty and ultimately the students in their classes so that SAP as a product can be integrated with classes on things like supply chain, okay, heavily used in the business area for inventory and other things. And they have a number of simulations that run on the SAP platform that help teach students key aspects of either running a business, particularly a manufacturing type business, or looking at engineering a supply chain and understanding what happens, what events have to happen in that supply chain. Now, ultimately, we infused SAP into 3 business courses and an IME course. So again, what's our takeaway here? Sometimes you can work together to bring a tool which will help what? Everybody learn new and exciting things. So what are some of the ongoing efforts today? Working with my colleague Craig Hoff, we're talking about common IE and ME concentration in manufacturing, interdisciplinary minor in plastics manufacturing, and we're getting input from GM, Ford, and Chrysler. And interestingly enough, it wasn't necessarily the major auto companies that brought this to us. They had gone to Autodesk, and Autodesk came to us and said, hey, can we have a meeting and talk about this? So interdisciplinary, IEME, as well as major companies. You know, and of course what we want to do ultimately is build a suite of courses that attract students into plastics manufacturing and the plastics industry. And here's the sales pitch, by the way. Plastics industry has terrible concerns about succession. A lot of people who own businesses that process plastics are interested in retiring, and they look around behind them at who's coming up. There's nobody there. That's an opportunity for you guys. You guys have such great opportunities. I sometimes get a little jealous. Faculty-student relationships. You know, teaching is an interesting thing to be in, and you know, I see several levels. You know, teaching is something I will gladly do for any student that comes. Mentoring, I'll provide mentoring to any student who asks. Counseling, I've had students who need to talk. You know, when a student you've gotten to know well misses commencement, you wonder, what's up? Then she comes into my office and says, my father died the day before commencement. You know, that's when you sit there and listen. And befriending, you know, you get into this profession and there are times, there are students you will get to know very well who will be friends for the rest of your life. And I think of the students who, you know, I've befriended over the many years, and that is something that really brings pure joy into my life. Now, teaching in the classroom and lab is an experience. You know, we talk about the serious things like educational goals and what's the outcomes, yeah, you know, what techniques are being used, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, you're reading my flashing text up there, aren't you? Well, yes, like the one student, in the advanced machining lab, of course, we use machine tools, and it's a little bit dirty. I mean, it's not bad. All the dirt will come out of your clothes, but it's not the welding lab. But, you know, I had one student who would wear nice clothes to lab, and sometimes heels, and I wasn't real thrilled about that. I told her several times. Well, finally one day I needed her. We were machining something, would stop the machine. I said, go in there and check the tool, see if we've had a break or anything. And she pokes her head in. By the way, she was wearing kind of a nice sweater that day. Pokes her head in, reaches over, accidentally hits the coolant on button. Now this is something which absolutely won't hurt the student. But after that, do you think she wore good clothes to a lab again? Nope, she learned her lesson. Now there's some frustrating moments too. One that comes to mind was the welding lab. Now, why might protective equipment be important in a welding lab? Oh, let's see, we're dealing with fire, flying metal, maybe, you know, heat. Certainly don't want that sunburn, right? Student comes up to me and says, hey, I just got this new tattoo. Do I really have to wear these sleeves? I said, well, I think you have a decision to make. You either put the sleeves on, or you fail today's lab and get out of here, because I will not compromise safety in the laboratory. Interestingly enough, my other story, well, I've got another one from the welding lab, but I did have one of those classes once that never moved. I felt like walking up to the front row, pulling out a pocket mirror and sticking it under any given student's nose to see if they were still breathing. You know, sometimes you get a class, you try everything. Now, admittedly, this was last class of the afternoon, but on Friday. But, well, see, you're a young faculty member, you get these things. But, you know, that gets kind of frustrating because usually you get some kind of feedback from your audience about what's working and what isn't. Well, every once in a while, if you're a statistician, you know about outliers. You get that outlier, and that just happens. Now, then there are kind of the harrowing moments, and one was in the welding lab. And one of the things that I do, students may remember the welding lab, you shear a coupon of metal that you're going to weld later on. And I was demonstrating that. Well, one of the things I do is when a student walks into my welding lab, they put on the helmet and raise the visor. And they have to have it on all the time they're in the lab, no taking it off. The visor can be up, but no taking off the helmet. Well, I get some grumblings here and then. Then I was cutting this coupon, and over in the corner of my eye, I see a student kind of waver and go down and fainted right in the middle of class. Now, fortunately, his visor came down and shielded his face as he fell. But there was a scratch on it from the corner of a metal box that he hit on the way down. I later pointed out to the class in successive classes, that's why I have you put on a helmet. Now, there's nothing that messes up your class more than having the paramedics come and take one of your students away. I must have lost 20 minutes of class while the paramedics came and took my student. He came back in the afternoon to my office kind of sheepishly, said, well, last night I didn't have any dinner. I ate a bag of popcorn about midnight and had no breakfast before coming to lab. And they told me over at the hospital that I shouldn't do that. Okay. One more harrowing experience. There's certain things that you probably shouldn't do in the laboratory. Now, before I refurbished the advanced machining laboratory, we had equipment there, none of which was younger than me. Big old lathe, we'd cut on that and whatnot. But the thing you shouldn't do in lab is set your professor on fire. And we were standing there, they were cutting a piece, and I saw this red hot chip go flying up, arc, coming down, and landed right in my hair. Now, fortunately, I got it out very quickly, but there are two things that I find that smell very, very bad. Burning flesh and burning hair, particularly when it's my own. I started wearing a ball cap in lab after that until we got rid of that machine and had an enclosed lathe. So there have been a few harrowing moments along the way, but it's been fun. If I turn to the Bard of Avon, he said all the world's a stage, and all men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And one man in his lifetime plays many parts. When Professor Lynch Karras introduced me, she told you about some of the roles I've played. Well, I have a new role, and that role will be at Gannon University, but I've certainly played several here. I've enjoyed the roles that I've played. I have loved Kettering students, Kettering faculty, and they'll always be close to my heart.
Well, I, for one, will miss you the most.
Oh, thank you.
And on behalf of Kettering, thank you very much for being our distinguished speaker today.
Ooh, nice clock.
Is there one question that's burning in your mind for Dr. Scheller?
What's WL stand for?
William Lewis. I'm named after my grandfather.
Good question.
For 17 years.
That's right. They've been. Oh, thank you very much.
We wish you all the best and hope you won't be a stranger.
Thank you.